What's up, curators? Brandon Patrick here with another episode of Curate, and today we're talking punk funk. That's right. Cocaine is a hell of a drug himself, Rick James, and we're starting off with Street Songs. This album is what saved Rick James's career in the 80s. He had a reputation for being trouble, and his live shows more often than not devolved into just absolute pandemonium, people smoking weed on stage back when that wasn't cool, and Rick needed a hit. This album's got a couple of them. Give It To Me, Baby, Super Freak, Ghetto Life, and Fire and Desire by Tina Marie and Rick James. You know that ballad, slow, ooh. Just two people talking about what they used to have. This is an incredible record, and here's a piece of trivia for it. When this record was recorded, Rick James was on tour with a guy named Prince. Yeah, Prince was opening for Rick James at this point, and they didn't like each other, they hated each other. But Prince had Warner Brothers money behind him, so he had all the newest synthesizers and all the newest equipment. Rick James didn't have that. So on a tour break, they stole the Prince equipment and recorded this album. Not only that, they then deleted all of the synth settings, so they had to reprogram all the synthesizers. Dick move, great album. Highly recommended. If you're gonna get one Rick James album, this is the album to get. 3 years before that one came out, the first solo Rick James record, Rick James and the Stone City Band, Come and Get It. This is where you get Mary Jane, you know, that beautiful ode to the herb we all love. This is a Motown record. Yeah, that Motown. This is a Motown record, and they didn't know what to do with Rick. Rick was a producer, he could play his own instruments, and he wrote his own songs, so it doesn't sound like a lot of Motown records. And really, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and Rick James were pivotal in evolving the Motown sound from the tuxedo doo-wop days of the 60s and 70s. Without records like this, Motown would have died a lot faster than it did, and you wouldn't get guys like Michael Jackson. So you want to see the origins of that Rick James funky sound? This is where you want to go. A lot of people consider it the very first Rick James album. I say a lot of people consider it the very first Rick James album because it came out in 1978 and it was the first album with Rick James's name on the top. But it's not the first Rick James album, no. The first Rick James album is sort of a mystery. I can't really find much information about it other than this is it. He was in a band called the Great White Cane. He was the lead singer, the lead arranger, and wrote most of the songs. And that's him right there. Yeah, that's Rick James. This record doesn't sound anything like the music that he would make in the 70s and 80s, although it was made in the early 70s. This doesn't sound like Come and Get It. This doesn't sound like Fire It Up. This doesn't sound like Bustin' Out of L7. This doesn't sound like anything Rick James had ever done, because this is a weird record. He'd fled the country after going AWOL in the military, and he found himself in Canada with a bunch of guys and was like, let's make some music. And this is what they came up with. It's a strange album, very horn forward, very arranged, a lot of intricate arrangements and horn parts, and some of it sounds kind of like a soundtrack. There's a song called The Big Showdown, and it sort of sounds like the end of any karate movie in the 70s. It's a weird album, but it's a Rick James album. He's all over it. He's doing all the lead vocals. He does most of the guitar and bass work. All of the arrangements are by him. It's a weird album, but it's a fun album. And if you're gonna get into Rick James, you throw that on your shelf, people are gonna be like, what? No. But you'll know. So if you're gonna get 3 Rick James albums, I recommend you get the big hit, which is Street Songs. This is the album that most people know. It's got the most hits on it. This is functionally a greatest hits album. I mean, it's got like 4 hits on it. He's got the Temptations singing background. Yeah, this is an incredible album to get. Highly recommend this if you're just looking to dig into some Rick James. If you want to hear the record that got the Rick James punk funk train started, this is where you go. It's funky, it's cool, it's a little more raw than Street Songs, but it's a great record. It's cool to see where he was as an artist in 1978, right before everything blew up for him in the best ways possible. Boom. and you want to shock people with a deep, deep hidden gem, Great White Cane. This record, like I said, not a lot of information about it out there, but funky, soulful. It's more R&B soul than, you know, the punk funk stuff that he would come up with later, but it's a great record. It's a fun record, and it's one of those things you can throw on at a party and people are like, oh man, what's this? I'm kind of digging it. And you're like, yeah, that's Rick James, bitch. That was Rick James. I'm Brandon Patrick. Next week on the show, we've got a double header for you, just like we do every week. We're gonna talk soul music. Yeah, soul. And we're also gonna talk a little known guy from Gary, Indiana by the name of Michael Jackson. See you next week.